It certainly, I think, attracted creative people.
The search for excellence began in 1874 when Charles Jeremiah Smith opened a machine shop in Milwaukee. Apprenticed in England, C.J. Smith was exposed to the most advanced mechanical thinking of the time. He started out making springs and axles for baby carriages, components for wagons, and machine tools. C.J. Smith & Sons quickly earned a reputation as innovative problem solvers. During the 1890s, the bicycle craze swept the country. C.J. Smith & Sons began making bicycle frame components and soon expanded into manufacturing the entire hollow frame itself. By 1895, C.J. Smith was the largest manufacturer of bicycle components in the United States. C.J. brought in his son, Arthur O. Smith, to design the company's factory edition, and in 1897, A.O. joined the company. The bicycle craze collapsed, but by then, the Smiths had shifted their sights to a new industry, the automobile. A.O. Smith began tinkering with a press to form sheet steel for automobile frames. In 1899, he produced the world's first pressed steel automobile frame. Within 3 years, he had orders from Peerless, Pope, Cadillac, Studebaker, and others. So A.O. Smith was ready in 1906 when Henry Ford came to Milwaukee. Ford was about to introduce his Model N, the first mass-produced, popular-priced car in the world. But he needed a supplier who could make frames, 10,000 of them in only 4 months. A.O. Smith and his employees took the challenge. They retooled their presses to form left and right frame side rails simultaneously. That innovation allowed them to increase production from 10 frames a day to 100. They filled Ford's order, and within a year, A.O. Smith was the preeminent supplier of frames in the U.S. In 1910, A.O. Smith Company moved to a 150-acre site on the edge of Milwaukee. It was making 100,000 frames a year, frames for nearly 2/3 of the cars produced in America. And guiding the fortunes of this emerging force in the automotive industry was a new president, Lloyd Raymond Smith.
Well, Dad was a very unique individual, very creative. He was a free thinker. He really loved business. And he was a great risk taker. And he really stimulated people to do things that they didn't think they were capable of doing.
He got a great delight, it seems to me, in seeing people succeed.
L.R. Smith introduced new products, including the Silent Smith line of trucks and the Smithway motor wheel. But his engineering triumph came in 1921, after 6 years of work and millions of dollars of investment.
His concern was at looking at the modern production, or the then modern production. It was very laborious, and the same people had to keep doing the same job over and over and over again. And I think what he had in mind was, gee, if we could build a machine that would take the drudgery out of the work, it would make people's lives a lot better, and we'd be much more productive.
The result of that vision was a plant that could mass-produce frames automatically without manual labor. A plant capable of building 10,000 frames a day, but using only 180 men. The mechanical marvel, as it was called, was one of the most complex, technologically advanced factories the world had seen. It was capable of performing 552 operations on a 10-second cycle. It helped launch A.O. Smith into the most ambitious decade in its history. But A.O. Smith had other technologies to offer the market. During World War I, the company had created the coated weld rod, a process that made welding more reliable and cost competitive. L.R. Smith and his engineers sought out new applications for this technology and found one in the petroleum industry. The oil companies were straining to quench the nation's thirst for gasoline, but the traditional riveted tanks used to refine gasoline were the bottleneck. Seeing an opportunity, A.O. Smith set out to make a welded pressure vessel that could withstand the high pressures and searing temperatures of the refining process. In 1925, A.O. Smith introduced the welded pressure vessel, and soon refineries all over the world were ordering Smith vessels. A second oil field innovation soon followed. In the 1920s, there was no natural gas industry because there was no economical way of transporting gas from the oil field to population centers. L.R. Smith's engineers began experimenting with a new process that could weld large diameter pipe in 40-foot continuous lengths. By 1929, orders were pouring in from all over the country, and A.O. Smith was making pipe by the mile. The natural gas industry was born, thanks in part to the vision of A.O. Smith. By 1929, A.O. Smith enjoyed a worldwide reputation for engineering skill. The corporation employed 800 engineers, housed in a state-of-the-art research center, one of the first of its kind in the country. Nothing could stand in its way, not even, it seemed, the Great Depression.
The crash of '29 had absolutely no effect on A.O. Smith because it had a backlog of orders. But I think the Depression finally hit in 1931. And it seems to me the sales went from something like $38 or $40 million a year to 6 or 7. I mean, it was just a shambles. Everything just fell apart.
A.O. Smith came very close to succumbing. Losses were in the millions. L.R. Smith brought in a new man, William C. Heath, to make the changes necessary for survival. The cost-cutting was relentless. There were layoffs. Unneeded equipment was sold or mothballed. Heat, telephones, and offices were strictly rationed. The beleaguered company began searching for new markets. The end of Prohibition in 1932 created an immediate need for beer kegs. A.O. Smith developed a durable steel keg, and the cash from those orders kept the company alive. That venture was followed by a new breakthrough. During the 1920s, A.O. Smith had experimented with glass-lining oil field pipe to curtail corrosion. After testing hundreds of glass formulas and numerous curing methods, A.O. Smith's engineers found a way to fuse a microscopically thin layer of glass to steel. Now, in 1933, they decided to apply this process to making single-piece glass-lined beer tanks. After many trials, Smith engineers perfected a method to line huge storage tanks. And for 30 years, A.O. Smith dominated the beer tank business. Smith's engineers soon found other uses for glass fused to steel. They patented a product that could resist the corrosive effects of hot water. The product was the glass-lined water heater. But before A.O. Smith could begin to market this innovation, another war broke out in Europe.
Dad was very, very concerned about the involvement with Great Britain in the war. And it was before Pearl Harbor, before the U.S. got involved. And he decided that A.O. Smith should do something to help the Allied effort.
World War II represented one of the great challenges to A.O. Smith's production expertise. During the war years, the corporation made tremendous breakthroughs in metallurgy, welding, and manufacturing. In 1940, it perfected welded bomb casings, and as war broke out, it quickly adapted its pipe mills to manufacturing bombs.
The top team decided that they were going to go after the more difficult things, where the defense effort was having trouble either getting sufficient quantities or where there were other bottlenecks.
A.O. Smith contributed millions of torpedo flasks, welded steel propellers, and landing gear to the war effort. After the war, A.O. Smith faced the monumental task of shifting back to peacetime production. Pent-up demand for cars and houses created a boom of orders for A.O. Smith frames and water heaters. Oil companies all over the world clamored for line pipe. At the same time, the corporation was making other plans.
Bill Heath had a definite idea and strategy to try to diversify A.O. Smith, because we were almost entirely devoted to the automotive market.
Immediately after the war, A.O. Smith built a plant to manufacture home water heaters. The Kankakee, Illinois plant opened in 1946, and within a year, production doubled. By 1954, A.O. Smith was making 54,000 glass-lined water heaters a month. In 1947, the company introduced another glass-lined product, a structure that could store agricultural feed better than conventional silos. It was called the Harvestor, and it played a major role in the growth of agribusiness in the 50s and 60s. Part of A.O. Smith's post-war strategy was to serve the petroleum industry from the oil well to the gas pump. The company began making meters, controls, and gas dispensers to go along with line pipe. As part of this strategy, A.O. Smith entered the motor business in 1940, purchasing a small company that made submersible pump motors for oil wells. 11 years later, it bought the Whirlaway Company in Tip City, Ohio. With post-war demand for appliances that used electric motors, A.O. Smith quickly became an industry leader. It developed the first electric motors for well pumps and domestic water systems. It was a pioneer in hermetic motors for air conditioning compressors, and began making furnace and air conditioner fan and blower motors in the 1950s. The automotive business was also growing rapidly, and to keep up with demand, A.O. Smith opened a new automated plant in 1954. The Granite City, Illinois plant shipped 3 million Chevrolet frames in its first 4 years of production. A.O. Smith research extended the company into new and exciting markets. The pressure vessel line was adapted for nuclear power applications. New products, such as powdered metal, were introduced. But perhaps the most interesting was the research conducted on applications for fiberglass.
We knew steel, and we knew steel from A to Z. But here were all these synthetic products coming into the market, and particularly glass and glass fibers.
Working jointly with Dow Corporation, A.O. Smith introduced its first fiberglass products in the late 1950s. In 1963, Dow and Smith opened a fiberglass pipe plant in Little Rock, Arkansas. As A.O. Smith grew in the 1960s and 70s, many of the products that had nurtured the corporation since the 1920s became less profitable. A.O. Smith exited the pressure vessel and line pipe business during this period. A number of other businesses were sold or divested. The corporation faced other challenges in the 60s and 70s. Compact cars, strikes, wage and price freezes, inflation, oil embargoes and gas shortages severely cut into demand for big cars with full chassis frames. Going into the 1980s, the outlook was bright for the corporation and its 4 core businesses: automotive, water heaters, motors, and agriculture, and the fiberglass joint venture now known as Smith Inland. But events conspired to shake that confidence and present A.O. Smith with its most profound challenges since the Depression.
The automotive situation was going along well until General Motors decided that they were going to get out of the full separate frame business for their passenger vehicles.
But, you know, we could see the handwriting on the wall. We knew that this other type of construction was becoming more and more popular, and so that we ought to begin thinking to start to prepare ourselves.
Passenger car frames in 1980 represented volume of more than $200 million. To make up for that loss, automotive increased its presence in light truck full-frame assemblies and branched out into structures for front-wheel drive cars. In 1984, the company began manufacturing engine cradles designed for a totally new car, the Ford Taurus. Automotive opened new plants equipped with sophisticated new technology. While this was going on, the corporation faced a second challenge. North American agriculture was plunging into recession, hurt by high interest rates and spiraling costs. One of the casualties was Harvestor. Sales fell by more than 90% in 5 years, with losses in the millions. Change was the watchword of the 1980s, sparked by back-to-back recessions and global competition. A.O. Smith launched a massive restructuring of its entire operation to meet these challenges. In 1981, Water Products lost more than $10 million. The company closed its high-cost plants and opened new, highly efficient residential water heater plants. It developed and launched dozens of products from a new product engineering center in McBee, South Carolina. In 1988, and again in 1990 and 92, the restructured Water Products Company set sales and earnings records. Electrical Products sought to improve its competitive position through automation and new low-cost operations. In 1986, the company acquired the Westinghouse Small Motor Division, securing its place as the #3 U.S. motor manufacturer. That same year, the corporation created the Smith Fiberglass Products subsidiary. A year later, Smith Fiberglass acquired Koch Fiberglass operations in Wichita, Kansas. By the end of 1987, Smith Fiberglass Products was North America's leading manufacturer of fiberglass pipe and fittings, with a strong presence in the petroleum production, service station, chemical, industrial, and power generation markets. As the 1990s began, Automotive Products completed a major expansion program, opening 5 just-in-time assembly plants. This included its first Canadian operation, a focused plant assembling modules for Chrysler. Restructuring was producing results. Efficiency improved. The company earned several major quality awards, as well as international recognition for its robotic capabilities. And A.O. Smith was starting to become more profitable. Throughout its history, A.O. Smith has held a consistent set of beliefs, a tradition, a business philosophy.
Really, the culture that was started way back, even back to C.J. Smith's time, and I think has carried forward, trying to do something special. Excellence of our products, innovative production processes.
Very high integrity among the people, and a wonderful spirit of cooperation and teamwork. Those are the things that have allowed the company to succeed. Without that, that sense of teamwork and participation, we wouldn't be where we are today.
A.O. Smith, a tradition of excellence from 1874 to the present, and carrying forward into the 21st century.